Welcome, everyone. I am Abigail Goodrich Whittlesey. I was born in the late 1700s, right here in Ridgefield. I lived here until I was married and moved away. Well, anyway, I love this town so much, and for a while I was your typical colonial woman. I raised 7 children. I worked on the farm. I took care of the house. I took care of my husband. And of course, I taught for a while, as many women did at that particular time. But I want to go back further. I want to tell you about my grandfather and my father. My grandfather was a minister. His name was Ebenezer Goodrich, but my father, oh, my father was wonderful. He was Reverend Samuel Goodrich. He was a big, stout man with a bald head, and everyone loved him. 25 years. He was the congregational minister. The church then was not near the fountain. It was where Jesse Leah's, that was the town green. Everything happened at the town green. Even the church, it was a school, it was a banquet hall, it was a meeting hall, and it was the church. Well, my father was probably one of the most popular, respected men in town. His sermons were strict, but they were all so emotional, sympathetic, and had just such meaning that you could take away and use for the week. Well, my father inspired me so much, but the other man that inspired me so much was my brother Samuel. Oh, he was a handsome young man, and he was also known as Peter Parley. He had a pen name. He was an author. The Peter Parley Schoolhouse was named after him. Even as a very, very young boy, Samuel would say, I don't like the books we use at school. They are boring. They're not on topics that we like. They are not written the way that I would want them to be written. What about animals and the sciences and about people and just about things that we care about? I am going to write books for children. Oh my goodness, that's exactly what he did. He was the first person to ever write books that were specifically for children. He followed his dream. He wrote hundreds of books, thousands and thousands of copies were published, not only in the United States, but all over the world. They were translated in different languages. He even had pictures in his books. My father and my brother, both Samuels, were so important to my life. Well, you just saw the picture of our schoolhouse, the West Lane Schoolhouse, the Peter Parley Schoolhouse. We went there until 8th grade. We loved that schoolhouse. That schoolhouse did so much for us. Now, my brother, he never went beyond that schoolhouse. He was totally self-educated, but he moved on to Massachusetts in politics because he didn't like what was happening in politics. He became a congressman. He was in the House of Representatives. He even became an envoy in Paris. He traveled internationally. Now, when I got to the 8th grade, my parents said, you are going to Litchfield, to the Sarah Pierce Seminary. So that's the schoolhouse that I went to. It was very, very religious, but it didn't give me the education I really wanted. You know, girls who were motivated at that time wanted chemistry and physics and high-level math and history like the men were getting, but we didn't get that because we weren't going anyplace. So we got parenting and cooking and cleaning and needlepoint and art and domestic skills. Now, there was one good thing about this seminary, though. Most of the seminaries were Calvinistic. It was strict. It was straight religion, no frills. My seminary in Litchfield was a little bit different. We followed the Locke philosophy, L-O-C-K-E. There were some humanities, there was some art, there was some creativity. They also focused on writing, and oh, that helped me so much in my career. Well, when I graduated from the seminary in Litchfield, of course, I had to get a job, and I became a teacher like anyone else at that time. And I went to the Finger Lakes and I worked in a seminary there. It was okay, but it was especially okay when I met the new principal. The two of us fell in love. Samuel Whittlesey and I married, and we had 7 children. Oh, I got along so well with the principal. Well, anyway, after a while, my husband got a new job, and the new job was at what they called a deaf and dumb asylum. Now, dumb did not mean lack of intelligence. It meant that usually a person was blind and deaf and not able to speak. Well, I got another job in Utica in a seminary, but I did so much work with my husband at the asylum. I worked with students with every possible handicap, poor students, rich students, orphan, students of different races. This helped me so much. Well, after teaching in 2 different seminaries, working with my husband, I was getting restless and I thought about my brother. My brother followed his dreams, and I looked at the women's situation. They didn't have anyone to communicate with. They were working all the time. They were at home. They had questions. They had concerns. They needed to talk in some way to other people. And I said, you know, my brother wrote for children. I'm going to write for women. I'm going to start a magazine, a women's magazine, a parents' magazine. And that's what I did. It was called the Mother's Magazine. And I took everything in my life and brought it all together. I certainly knew religion. I had 6 family members that were in religion. There was my grandfather, there was my father, my brother was a minister, my husband was a part-time minister, my brother-in-law was a minister, and my son-in-law, so I knew religion. I had gone to a seminary, I taught in 2 different seminaries, I knew teaching. I had 7 kids. I knew how to parent. My kids had health problems. I knew about health. I knew about special needs people. Oh my goodness. I had worked in the asylum with my husband, and I knew women. I knew they were frustrated. I knew they were discouraged. I knew they needed a magazine. Now, my husband was also good at publishing, so he helped me. So I became the editor, a journalist, and the publisher for the Mother's Magazine in the 1830s. This was the precursor. This was before parents' magazines, Ladies' Home Journal, House and Garden, and all of this type of magazine. It wasn't attractive, as you just saw on the screen. There were no graphics. It was so plain and simple. There were about 36 stories on 40 pages, and these articles were very short and to the point, and there was no real theme. Oh, it would have been nice to have graphics, but there weren't any. Well, you saw the table of contents, and I'm just going to read you A few of the titles from the articles so that you can see how eclectic these were some of the articles written by me, written by other people, by people that I interviewed, and so on. Parents as teachers, hints to parents. Baby tea parties, cultivating a taste for reading. Anecdotes from the farm, family sketches, early prayer habits, molding bad tempers, poetry on the land, the virtuous wife, being a young mother, helping the orphaned and the poor in your community. Oh my goodness, did people love this? It was such an outlet for them. Every month they couldn't wait for this magazine to come out. Oh, sometimes 20 people in a community would share it. They had dates and you had to move it along. It was in the library. You could get it in the general store. People kept them and had a whole library full of these magazines. I could not believe what an amazing vehicle I had created. Well, it was not only local, it became national, international. My husband and I had to move to New York City because it became so large. Unfortunately, in New York, my husband passed. Oh my God, what a tragedy for the family, for the piece of work, for everything. Well, I was lucky because one of my brother-in-laws stepped up and he helped me out for quite a while. But it was getting very tedious and more difficult without my husband. At that point, two very small women-type magazines came forward and said they would like to merge. I said, fine, how would you like to buy me out? Even then, people bought each other out. Oh, I could not believe how much money they bought me out. The three merged. Oh, I was free. What a relief. Out of my 7 children, only 2 lived to be adults. Henry was a missionary in India, and that left Emily, a most loving daughter. She took me in, and I was very fond of her husband. Her husband saw after a while that I was bored. I needed something to do. I needed women to talk to. I loved to write, and he said, look, I'll work with you. Let's publish just a small magazine locally called the Whittlesey magazine. And that's what we did. It was not overwhelming. I wrote most of the articles myself. It kept me fresh and alive. At age 70, I died, and I was still writing for the Whittlesey magazine. And my story showed you that even back in colonial times, oh, women knew how to multitask. There was not just one thing they could do. They could do a lot. It wasn't easy, but they could. And it showed that even back then, everyone has a passion, and you need to follow this passion. And lastly, what I want to say is, I hope you have all been to the Peter Parley, West Lane, Little Red Schoolhouse, or seen one of them. There were 13 in Ridgefield at one time. The Foreign Legion, that is on North Salem Road. Next to Limestone gas station, there's one that's been made into a home. And on Old Branchville Road, there's a schoolhouse that acts as storage for the town. Most of the others, poof, gone. So go to the West Lane Schoolhouse. Take a tour, but remember one thing. It wasn't only my brother Samuel that did something very special by being the first in children's literature. There was also his sister, Abigail, who was probably the first to publish a woman's magazine and change the face of communication with women. Thank you for listening, and I hope you're going to come back next week and hear about Edwina Eustace Dick. We had 3 amazing opera singers in our community. Edwina was one of them, but she wasn't just an internationally known opera singer. She started musical therapy. We didn't have that before her. And she also donated half of her time singing for good causes. I love people like that. Thank you so much.